Let's talk briefly about our oceans. Our oceans are in a very, very damaged state. They're being destroyed at a rate that is become irreversible in certain aspects in our lifetime. There are three principal reasons our oceans are being destroyed, or three principal ways, one principal reason. The ways that they're being destroyed are by warming and acidification, by pollution, and also by loss of species, loss of habitat. And all three ways that our oceans are being destroyed have the consistent weaving of one thread through all of them, and that is what we can find on our plates. For instance, what we eat on land, our raising and slaughtering of livestock on land, is creating warming and acidification of our oceans by way of greenhouse gas emissions. And our raising and eating livestock on land is causing more than 550 nitrogen-flooded dead zones around the world, comprising 95,000 square miles of areas completely devoid of life. So any meaningful discussion of the state of our oceans has to begin with frank discussions about land-based animal agriculture. But it is really fishing that is the largest contributor to our demise of our oceans by itself as one entity. And that's because whether we have climate change or not, we are depleting our oceans in terms of the sea life that's located and habitat that is needed for our sea life. We're depleting those at rates where it's predicted by most scientists that nearly all commercially recognized sea life in our oceans will be collapsed by way of collapse of their own systems by the year 2048, whether climate change is in the picture or not. And that's principally because of our desire to eat fish. We're destroying habitat by the mechanisms of fishing, whether it's purse seine or long line or trawling, bottom trawling, or gill net, or poisons or explosives. There's so many different methods of destroying fish and destroying habitat while they're fishing. But it's also by extracting, or what they call harvesting, target fish. That's the fish that you want to eat on your plate. Target fish are becoming extinct, and then the next fish in line are being fished, the next fish in line in terms of commercially desirable fish species. And so we're creating this cascade effect of exploiting species up and down the food web because of our desire to eat whatever target fish is on the menu. Over 90% of all large fish species are gone. For instance, tuna, cod, halibut, pollock, salmon, krill, menhaden. There's so many different types of fish species that, both large and small fish species, that are now reaching the point where between 75 and 95% of their species is gone. It's been exploited, and they are already on the verge of collapse. Of the 17 major fishing stock areas in the world, all of them are either on the verge of collapse or have already collapsed or are damaged heavily because of overfishing. Over 1,000 species that have been studied have over 87% of those 1,000 species studied are now in a state of decline and damage from overfishing practices. I like to term our fishing practices in our oceans more as the problem is more related to fishing than the term overfishing. I think overfishing is a term that could be applied fairly accurately in the early to mid 1800s, whereas today any type of fishing, whether it's commercially in the open seas or in our reef systems or in the EEZ, the Economic Exclusive Zone, which is about a 200-mile zone away from out from countries that they are allowed to fish. Regardless of where the fishing occurs, it's exploiting species to the point where they're damaged and they will likely not recover in our lifetime. And the other, in fact, it was two important reports were just released in the last year indicating that the previous calculations of the amount of fish that have been extracted from our oceans were underestimated by the United Nations. They were underestimated in terms of commercial fishing, but they were also underestimated in terms of indigenous people, in terms of how they're fishing around their own reef systems, sometimes destroying complete populations of various fish in these reef systems. You know, I visited Hawaii not too long ago and was asked to speak to their Senate regarding their ecological, their environment situation. And Hawaii is a very beautiful state, obviously, but their economic and ecological connection is basically a mess. They import over 90% of their food at a tune of about $3 billion per year. And the reason they're doing that is because they've run out of land to grow food, and they've run out of fish in their oceans. 75% of the indigenous fish species around the reefs of Hawaii have declined by 75%. Over 90% of most of the fish species in all their islands have been lost. And on land, between 80 and 87% of all of their agricultural land is used for livestock, mostly grass-fed livestock, which is creating food for them at a tune of at a rate of about 40 to 50 pounds per acre, instead of using their land for plant-based alternatives. So I view Hawaii as a small example of planet Earth in terms of the only difference is that in terms of running out of their resources because they're using them inefficiently. They're overfishing their reef systems, and therefore they're in serious decline, likely irreversible in our lifetime, and they have run out of land in their islands to produce food for their own human population. And this is no different than we are on planet Earth. The main difference is that Hawaii is just a little ahead of us in terms of the visibility of their difficulty. And secondly, Hawaii can import food right now from another source, whereas we don't have that luxury on planet Earth.